All right. Apologies if I cut out. I've been having like weird internet stuff going on all day. So
Oh, it's all
yeah,
right. I mean, you look a little foggy there, but I think we can work
yeah.
through it.
This
Yeah,
my webcam
excellent.
mostly. Anyways, sorry, excuse me.
And yeah,
um,
and of
I
course,
didn't
then
really
I
have like a.
can.
Oh,
Sorry,
go
say
ahead.
again.
No, no, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say I'm happy to introduce you.
Sure.
First of all, thank you everyone that is currently in the room, as well as those that will be watching this later. I know we had quite a few of you accept invitations for this event, so hopefully you guys will get to enjoy it a little bit later. But again, thank you for coming to this GIS Career Talk. These are excellent opportunities for you guys to see what you can do with this particular skill set, not just learning the software and the technology, but really understanding what access this kind of analytical tool can do for you as a in terms of jumpstarting your career and what you can do with that. So here in the house, we've got an illustrious alum who who has made the most of this degree. So Tyler, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you and talk about some of your accolades. So Tyler is an urban planner and data manager who's based currently out of Chicago, Illinois. He was born here and raised here in Detroit, and clearly proud of it. And received his undergrad degree from Western Michigan University, but then came back over here to Wayne State to get his master's of urban planning. Um, he spent a decade leveraging his rather impressive skill set to support Detroit through various roles within the city government, as well as agencies that are affiliated with it. And currently, he is a senior consultant with CDM Smith, providing guidance on data management, application development, and urban policy. All right, Tyler, thank you so much for being here. Lay it on us. Oh, you're currently muted.
I should know better. All right. Sorry. What I was saying is, I don't really have like a super formal presentation or anything. I just figured I'd kind of go through my background, and then kind of showcase a couple things, and then I guess take questions, comments, all that kind of more informal dialogue. Um, so yeah, thanks for the intro. Um, I'm Tyler Shelton. I mm, went to Wayne State uh, a little while ago, I guess. At this point, from a master's in urban planning, um, got my undergrad in geography from Western, like kind of a precursor to an urban planning program that they've got going now. And yeah, I by the time I graduated from Wayne State, I uh, got connected with some folks working on a program called Motor City Mapping about a decade ago, which was this effort um, to basically initially to sort of help um, uh, just sort of manage the parcel record for Wayne County, essentially, particularly around their foreclosure auction, but then evolved into this sort of global effort to develop like a sort of parcel standard, essentially, that the company I worked for at the time is still pursuing. So I worked there. Um, I don't know if anybody is familiar with that effort, but they had us literally going door to door, identifying properties, um, trying to really apply some sort of spatial technology to what was at that time basically just like a printed PDF that the county would release uh, about the foreclosure auction. We were sort of trying to map that and uh, bring more information to the process, because at that point, houses were being sold that were occupied. People didn't realize that their properties were being sold. People didn't realize they were in foreclosure. This is thinking about it now. I mean, it's kind of crazy how much advancement there's been, just in terms of the sort of programming around foreclosure prevention. Because at that time there really wasn't any there. I mean, people didn't even know that their houses were going into tax foreclosure. So, anyways, I worked on that program. Started out sort of in a hybrid role. I was, managing field crews. I was going out there myself. I was developing applications. I was doing sort of all these different things, just kind of getting where you fit in. When that program sort of wrapped, uh, stuck around the company. Like I said, they sort of expanded their vision, um, and started trying to sort of take the show to the road, basically, taking that sort of parcel mapping focus to different areas of the country. And now they've taken their efforts global. But I spent about 2.5 years with that company, and then I ended up with the Detroit Land Bank Authority, um, where I was initially hired as their urban reuse, or what do they call it? I don't even remember what the title was. Land reuse manager. It was pretty involved in like the urban ag scene at the moment, and basically they just needed some sort of liaison with folks who were trying to acquire um, land bank property. For those not familiar with the land bank, um, they are what they're the owner of last resort is what they're is what they like to tell people. Basically, if properties don't sell through that if properties don't sell through the aforementioned um, county foreclosure auction, they then go into the custody, I guess, of the land bank authority. Um, and the Detroit Land Bank, as we know it today, was established about 2, 3 years before I joined them. So still pretty young, just sort of building out their roster. I came on as the land use manager, sort of being that liaison, but then also I had this sort of technical background, so I eventually sort of worked my way through assisting them in different aspects. And by the time I left, I was um, just a general sort of data manager, um, less of a sort of customer front facing role, more of a sort of systems management and data policy sort of strategy guy. And then from there, I ended up with the city of Detroit, where I was again sort of GIS everyman, sort of just doing whatever, maintaining our enterprise, developing apps, and everything in between. And again, all of this within the sort of timeline of, I guess you could sort of say like a re-emergent um, sort of city structure in a sense. Post bankruptcy, their IT department was getting sort of coming off the ground, so they had this vision of sort of establishing a lot of their work around GIS. Uh, I was actually hired by Garland Gilchrist, who's now the lieutenant governor. But at the time, he came back here uh, uh, to basically sort of vision set, how the city would use technology post bankruptcy. And so, yeah, there were a couple of us. Now the team's grown significantly. And yeah, I was at that for a couple of years. like I said, kind of just doing everything GIS and data related. And then wound up in CDM Smith in my current role, where I'm sort of a consultant. And I eventually moved to Chicago. Uh, and yeah, so that's kind of the background. Uh, I figure we can sort of, if anybody has any questions, we can kind of go through that at the end. But I did want to sort of just take a second and just sort of put some uh, context to some of my work. So just got a
Please
couple
do.
of different. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was saying please do.
Okay, yeah. So just a couple of things I can share. So the city of Detroit. So my background, and especially now that I'm in CDM Smith is an engineering firm first and foremost. I don't have. I mean, I come from a government background, a public sector, urban planning background. Uh, so I say all that to say that there's a sort of synthesis of you know how I ended up where I ended up and how I ended up, but you can kind of get to, but I'll say GIS in general is kind of what you make of it. It's obviously informed by your interest, kind of in a way that other um, fields may not be so much, but kind of in the same vein of a lot of sort of contemporary data professions. Uh, so, anyways, when I was at the city of Detroit, one of the first things we did, um, because like I said, post bankruptcy, they're you know I wouldn't say flush with cash, but for the first time in a long time, they have some optimism about looking forward. Um, After going through some pretty horrendous stuff. So they did this website rebuild, and one of the first things we did was this My Detroit um, viewer. So uh, this is kind of what I want to talk about in terms of like how GIS is applied um, in you know different sort of contexts. So this application allows anyone in the background. Basically what we were developing geocoders and sort of compiling all these different data sources and cohabitating them and developing data warehouses and all of that stuff, the fun stuff, to basically develop tools like this that allow um, residents to you know uh, yeah um, to figure out basically their spatial context. So all of this is driven by sort of the work that we were doing with the GIS team and the Department of Innovation and Technology. This is just an easy sort of front page thing. I mean, a lot of my work obviously wasn't like readily available to folks immediately, but I was doing a lot of analysis and data management for people behind the scenes. But these are the kinds of tools that one can expect to build or one can build, if given the opportunity with the GIS skill set. So things, understanding, again, where one's property fits in, all of these different sort of program areas, um, and whether that be trash recycling or uh, police commission, um, uh, information on well, I'm looking up City Hall, so they don't really have any demolitions nearby, but uh, looking up different properties, you can sort of see where where different things are happening, and um, all of these things are sort of powered by GIS in the background and GIS folks maintaining data or develop or maintaining systems to maintain data. So I was working on stuff like this. One of my, I guess it depends on where you stand on the issue. Infamous or hate it or love it programs was the speed hump development program. Again, this is sort of bare bones here, but um, it worked with the Department of Public Works to first develop a model to determine sort of suitability for speed hump deployment across all of the center, across all the street segments throughout the city. Which you may or may not be surprised. And I don't just mean this for the city of Detroit, but sort of governments at large. Some of these things aren't as formal as you may expect. These sorts of decisions, um, and not only are they not formal, but they don't have maybe as uh, traceable of a decision lineage as you may believe. A lot of this stuff is sort of email back and forth, conversations here and there. So a lot of your work as a jazz professional um, is really developing systems for data management, and and obviously the application of that data. So I worked with the Department of Public Works to develop some models, for where speed humps should be deployed strategically, using things like number of children within a census block, the proximity to a school, um, you know, traffic incidents and crashes, those sorts of things, to develop models that they were able to, develop um, reliable and durable plans for, years out. So this is another program from my Detroit days that we were able to develop. And then uh, here's a and after I left Detroit, I've been a consultant for the last couple of years. So I've been doing, it's not all strictly technical. Some of it's writing, obviously. We develop things like this. Strategic plans for different cities and municipalities and utility companies and you name it, to help them sort of figure out how to actually deploy GIS and data management in a strategic way, sort of get the most bang out of their buck with the different contracts that they've acquired or plan on acquiring. Um, so things like this, this is actually done in story maps, but it's basically an executive summary of some work we did, sort of advising them on, some short and long term strategic goals and what the plans are. But then besides from that, I'm also actually developing things. A lot of my work right now is around um, uh, lead service line management. Um, well, specifically removal, not just management. We're trying to get lead out of water. Um, and so this is a program that I manage with a utility out east, tracking basically their field efforts, literally going around to about 700,000 um, unique service lines to determine whether or not they have lead or not, and then subsequently, um, managing the construction processes of removing that. So this is a sort of high level dashboard that gives you sort of what you got going on, but um, we've also developed tools to actually give the field crews some of those data collection capabilities in the field, centralized in a manner. Um, so again, I mean, this is essentially stuff that I was doing 10 years ago with Motor City Map. Still doing it today. That's kind of what you know the work boils down to. Data management, data collection, program management, that sort of thing. Um, there is no shortage of it. Folks are doing this sort of work, um, whether or not they recognize, the need, the necessity for GIS, whether they have the capacity for it. When I was when I was doing Motor City Match, we were simultaneously out there on these iPads and these apps we developed with um, I remember one time we ran into this old with some older ladies who were from a church that were doing essentially the same thing. They printed out a PDF of all the tax foreclosure properties in their neighborhood. They sort of circled all the addresses that were in their neighborhood, and they were just going around to them, trying to figure out what was like firebomb, that sort of thing. And so that's like the that's the thing is that people are thinking of all of this. People are thinking of space and the intersection of space and data, you know, in formal, informal ways. They're applying it. They're pursuing it. What GIS allows us to do as a technology is sort of manifested in a way that people can take advantage of. Because, like I said, if we didn't develop this program, these folks like this lead service program, if we didn't develop this, they'd be out there on paper and clipboards, trying to take the same data and passing it off to administrative assistants to you know, transcribe it into some, Word doc that gets passed around to 77 people that gets lost and mixed up. And, so it's not so much that, as a GIS or data person, it's not so much that you're reinventing the wheel. It's just, you're just smoothing it out a bit. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to turn that what starts as a hexagon into a circle, maybe. So yeah, it might not seem like it, but I don't really have a whole bunch of experience talking about myself. But that's kind of the gist. I'm open to questions or comments or anything
And I've got plenty
that
of
anybody may have.
questions.
Yeah, sure.
And hopefully, some of them will get to the heart of what future viewers of this video will be curious about. So you just alluded to a lot of one of the things that I want to bring about this concept of data management. You're talking about kind of some of the utility of what you do and how it can save people from using either lower tech versions of trying to like put paper maps together or whatever else it looks like. But because of the fact, so I teach intro to GIS here, and so a lot of my students are completely new to all of these concepts altogether. And so I've been talking to them about, simple analysis and like kind of the amazing things you can do with this tool. But I think that an under discussed element of it is data management. We talk about data analysis. We talk about, kind of manipulating variables or attributes to come up with something. But in terms of like actually managing these massive amounts of data, that's something that is maybe not viewed as like the sexier aspect of GIS in some cases, but it does seem like that's kind of a large element of what you have done in various parts of your career. So if you could tell us a little bit more about like what data management is and why we need it, and um, if the analysis part that some researchers do would be possible without people like you doing the data management on the front end.
Yeah. Um, so again, I said before, eh, and maybe this isn't just a GIS specific thing, but careers are synthetic. They're kind of built on your experience. And my first job was with, you know, Loveland Technologies, which is now Regrid, doing that Motor City Map exercise, and their whole mantra, was about standardization, data standards, trying to develop a national parcel standard. Um, and that really sort of informed my entire career. I mean, even coming back to the city, um, is the the data. I think don't get me wrong. When I was in school, I obviously learned, things like relationships and joins and all those things. But you don't. But what you don't realize, I guess, until you're sort of in the seat, is that um, those things have to be developed. Those relationships, um, the data uh, uh, doesn't come with a foreign and a primary key. You know what I'm saying? Like you have to, like, through your sort of deductive reasoning, through interviews with folks, you have to find those things and somehow integrate them into the data. I'm kind of getting away from your question here, but I want to be clear in that, like, the data management, um, the effort that goes into sort of maintaining, not just the relationships, but accuracy, um, sort of everything, is key, is critical. Because, like I said, I mean, like the tool I shared earlier from the city of Detroit, you know, I mean, these are all, you're talking dozens plus data sets here. You know, building department stores its data. This is these are record IDs. Assessors has their own record ID. Neighborhoods each have an ID. These are all different data sets that someone is responsible for managing, and um, uh, that's, GIS folks, data managers, whatever you want to call yourselves. A lot of it can feel like sort of cat herding, because you've got to get everybody on the same page in that, like, hey, if your building permits aren't, you know up to snuff, then you can't participate in this thing that increases transparency, that you know allow that'll save you, 10 phone calls. um so yeah, I don't know if I'm directly answering your question, but yeah, data management, um data maintenance, data hygiene, whatever you want to call it, is key. And I think, especially as GIS folks, because I mean, first off, I mean, like, not to be blasphemous or anything, but it's like, GIS, you know, the G is important, obviously, but I mean, we're just talking information systems. That's foundational here. You just have to understand information systems, information management. Um, uh, that's key.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's you absolutely answered my question, and I appreciate that. Um, One that's maybe a little bit more geared towards again, an audience of people who are just starting to um, gain interest in GIS, whether it's they're taking the class or whether they're considering doing so or considering the certificate. I'm kind of curious about if you feel like the education that you got, whether that was at Western Michigan initially, or some here at Wayne State in GIS, if you feel like that was kind of adequate for you to get like a running start, for your first job, and how the experience of using GIS on that first job, like what that was like. If this was something that you're using all the time, every day, if it was just a fringe part of your job, if it just made you more valuable in general as an employee, or if that was like the bulk of what you did. I guess just kind of give us some indication of how valuable the education you got prior to your first job was, and then once you got in that job, like how helpful was it, and what did you do?
So yeah, it's tricky. It's tricky. I was an urban planner. I was an urban planner for a small city just outside Detroit for a little while, and you know, the city manager once told me, like, he didn't really understand why we were so obsessed with maps. Um, so it's like, unfortunately, so much of it is like, um, I don't know. You can be so much of it is contextual to the role you're in. I will say, GIS serves, so many functions. I mean, aside, I mean, like there's the analytical piece of it, the sort of investigatory, like let me figure out what this is, but it's also a very powerful communicative tool, um, uh, that you know you can really use to get your point across. Because here's the thing, I mean, like I'm a GIS at this point, that this is my path more or less, right? Like, I mean, I'm an urban planner, but GIS is mostly, I mean, I'm mostly in that lane, very specifically, but you don't have to be, I mean, I work with urban planners, I work with civil engineers, I work with urban designers, I work with all sorts of folks, um, who have, I'd say, I mean, you don't necessarily need to know as much about GIS as me, but have enough of an acumen for GIS that they can pretty much do anything one needs. So uh, I think the application of GIS within your specific context is however you make it. I mean, I had a friend, um, you know, tracking, uh, bird migratory patterns. She has a bachelor's in in biology, tracking bird migratory patterns out in Alaska. I mean, like, and she had a GIS certificate, and like kind of showed what she could do with the software, and that became a trajectory for her. So I think it's just like, um, it's a tool. I was able to sort of find a lane for me specifically with that tool, but again, I mean, that's like, uh, but I think the value of it is just like as an its true value is just as that sort of tool, as a communication tool, as an analytical tool. Like this just gives you an opportunity. GIS gives you an opportunity to um to do different things. Now, for me personally, I mean, my first couple roles, I mean, I yeah, I was using GIS. Uh, yeah, damn near daily. I mean, definitely in my first role, I was using GIS. So not my first role, but um, when I was with Motor City Match, because that wasn't actually my first job, but that was like kind of the first relevant one. Um, uh, before that, I mean, I was that planner. I guess even going back to that planner job, I mean, I was using GIS fairly regularly, but the city was so small, and you couldn't tell them shit. Like what's a map going to tell me? I've been here my whole life. There was a lot of that. Um, but going into Loveland, a firm that relies on technology, they obviously I was using GIS a lot. Going into the different, I think I think what you want to do with GIS is show people something that they haven't seen. You know, um, well that like I think that's like, because I think that's how you hook people. If you show them something that they haven't seen or haven't thought about, or in a different way, and that's where the communication piece comes in. You know, um, that's when they'll you got them hooked, and they start wanting more. And I mean, that's a lot of what we were doing with the city of Detroit. Because I mean, imagine these are folks who have been around for decades. You know, like who care? Like what's you know before the city had centralized computer systems. Like what am I going to show them about their day-to-day work? And it's like, but then when you're able to, and you're able to say, hey, like there are things here that um, that you might not be aware of. Um, that's really where you get buy-in, and unfortunately, I'd hate to. Well, uh, if you're gonna follow that specific path, the sort of GIS specialist role, like you're gonna have to be a bit of an evangelist because I don't really know if it'll ever really reach that point of like universal awareness, um, but again, but you could also just be, a urban planner or a policy person. I mean, either way, whether GIS is your full time thing or, you know, you're just or not just, or whether GIS is your full time thing or you're a policy person or a planner with or a designer with GIS in your back pocket, um, I think the same applies. Just leverage it for communication, leverage it for analysis, um, wherever you can. Because, like I said, I mean, if you can show people, if you can sort of set yourself apart, right? That's what I mean by showing people something they haven't seen. If you can set yourself apart, if people know you to be like, hey, this person, you know, this is the maps person. This is the person who can show me these things. That's how you make yourself invaluable.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I've actually mentioned kind of that as an idea to a lot of my students when I plug this. I guess one could say that I kind of fit in that evangelist role too, where I pretty much in any room I'm in when I'm talking about great tools for analysis, generally spatial analysis in particular, but just in general as a way to conceptualize problems that we're trying to deal with in social sciences more generally. Like I'm like, hey, GIS, like if you want to be marketable, if you want to be effective, GIS is a great place to start and to finish. I also really appreciate what you're saying about your friend or colleague that was kind of doing migratory paths of birds and things like that, because I think that a lot of folks think about GIS as a tool that like urban planners use, and maybe some
Yeah.
engineering firms might use, or architecture firms might use to accompany some of the things they do. But like, I have started to look at it in my kind of academic research as well as my professional life as like a tool to like augment any other interest I have or any job I want to like be working on. It's a useful tool for whatever that is. So I've told my students, like, if you do marketing, or business or something else like this, it's really useful to have this skill set because it'll just amplify um, any of the either passions you have as an individual or tasks that you have as a professional. Like you are just that better equipped to be able to go and perform analysis that other folks can't. And so I really appreciate you bringing up the fact that it's a really versatile tool that can work beyond like the realm of like public policy and urban planning. Um, so with that being said, I'm kind of curious about, um, being in Detroit, it seems that the city of Detroit is like kind of it's a very natural conduit for a lot of the interests of a lot of people that come through Wayne State, especially through the MUP program or the Urban Studies bachelor's. Um, I'm kind of curious if you could talk a little bit about what it's like to work for a city, whether it's the city of Detroit or any other small municipalities that you've worked with, both from a GIS perspective as a GIS like technician of some kind, but also just in general what you encountered that might be helpful for students who like their first job might be with the city and they might get a job working for a consultant firm or a contractor. Just maybe like clue them in on like city work. What's that like?
Yeah. Well, um, I love it. I it was sort of so working for a city, and obviously I drank the Kool-Aid. I mean, I got my master's in urban planning, so I mean, I come with a slightly sort of skewed perspective on the role and utility of the bureaucracy, to be honest. Um, but working it within that. Uh, I think is a really really cool experience. I mean, again, not to sort of not to sort of harp on it, but obviously it's contextual to you know your role and where you fit in, and not and even sure, yeah, the city of Detroit was a great place to work in 2015, 16, maybe not in 2000, you know, 7. What I'm saying? I mean, there's obviously, you're sort of at the whim, but I'll tell you now. I mean, I work in a private company, and shit, I'm at the whim every day there too. So I mean, it's really just like, once you kind of just get over that. I mean, the thing with working in cities though is, public means public, so it's like, there's a sort of level of transparency there that, so a bit more about the inner workings just from the news than you might know about, an accounting firm, or an engineering firm that I work at. But anyways, working in the city is great. I think, I think you end up integrated into these sort of, I know this can sort of be thrown around as a bad word, but legacy systems. But I honestly think that can be great, because you have something to build on, um, yeah, you're sort of a part of something, and, and I mean that literally. I mean, like, working with folks who have stuck around for decades, and but then also, like, you know, that can be applied to the literal, the work we're talking about, the data management, the policy, all that stuff. You've got this sort of legacy of work, um, that you are able to contribute to. Um, uh, yeah, but I mean, I I working in cities is really working in public sector, working in governments, county, utility, whatever it may be. I I always enjoyed it. I think, you know, the sort of, and obviously not everybody is so bought in, maybe, but I mean, the sort of collective understanding that, your work is here to contribute to some sort of, common service, um, can be a sort of great motivating factor. Having spent some time on, a couple of different, uh, sort of sides of the coin, that certainly always motivated me. Like, this work we're doing, like I said, I mean, take it or leave it with the speed humps. I mean, I've got my own sort of philosophy on traffic management, but, um, you know, uh, either way, it's impacting folks, and being able to do that, even in, these sorts of email job sort of, less, tangential roles, has been was always really cool to me. But yeah, I don't know really what else. I enjoyed it. I think it's a great sort of career path. Yeah, I'd encourage anybody. I mean, trust me, especially being on the. Let me tell you, being on the consultant side, like, these places need capacity. They need folks. Cities. I mean, not to like cut my own legs off, but like, like, these places I'm consulting for shouldn't be hiring me. They should be hiring folks to actually do the work, and not, spending so much money on the consulting sort of paradigm. Um, they should, just be building up their own capacity to actually develop these sorts of things. So, yeah, I'd encourage anybody to sort of pursue public work.
It's paying the benefits. That's the difference. I've been in that exact same position too, where as a consultant or as a contractor, I'm like, why don't you just have folks that you have on payroll to do this? And it's, the financials behind it are really
Oh yeah,
complicated. Yeah, but
no
still,
doubt.
I agree with you on that one though.
Yeah, yeah. Somehow, hopefully, yeah, we can sort of figure that out, because yeah, they need it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's good to have folks in house. Before I ask my next question,
Mhm.
does anyone else on the call want to ask a question? I feel like I'm hogging the whole thing, of course. Anybody in there? All right, that's fine. I'm going to run with my next one then.
Yeah.
So I guess, and obviously I'm going to ask like kind of a round everything out question here next, but I guess prior to that, I'm kind of curious if you feel like if you could have, I guess, met your career aspirations without this particular tool, without this knowledge of GIS. Now, granted, the things you do obviously intimately require your knowledge of GIS, but do you feel like you could have gotten to an equivalent place or worked for doing this kind of same work, working for the same kinds of people and with the same kinds of people without access to this method of doing both data management and data analysis? Like, could you have been what you wanted to be without kind of working towards mastery of GIS?
Well, to be honest, I'm still trying to figure out what I want to be. Like I'm not entirely sure what I want to be at this point, you know. And I mean, I say that because I just don't really know um, if like if the if the role necessarily exists in the way that I need it to. But uh, yeah, so I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out. I mean, the only thing I really ever wanted to do was be an urban planner. Uh, like I don't know. I thought I was gonna be, um, you know, uh, holding, public review comments and all that stuff. And I did a bit of that. Uh, and I, I, I find myself, I don't know. It's kind of, I don't want to say like just chose me or anything like that, but it's like you really get into like a get in where you fit. Like my problem in a way is that like if I weren't doing this work, I'd be concerned about this work. Like if I'm not dealing with data governance and management and application development and all that shit, like and like I'd be interested in it, even if I were on the sort of user end. I'd be, you know, that's essentially how I found myself in my position, right? Like, I mean, even as an urban planner, it was just like, questioning the data, um, it led me to, to getting more involved in data development and led me to getting more involved in application, all those things. It's really just like a sort of rabbit hole for me. So it's like this, in some ways, was an inevitability, um, because I just find it to be of the utmost importance, especially when you're trying to communicate things. You just want to have some confidence in what you're communicating, and a lot of the time, especially in the public sector, you're communicating data. um, so, so that's sort of how I ended up in my role. Yes, I mean, as far as, yeah, like, could I do it without the tool? I mean, no, I couldn't do it without the tools. I mean, and there's still so many tools that I'm trying to explore to figure out how to make myself even better at this thing. But yeah, I think it's critical if you believe yourself to be a sort of curious person, um, uh, uh, that that you have the means to sort of investigate, and that's kind of what GIS is. I mean, at the end of the day, it's an investigatory tool, to sort of meet out, your different questions.
Excellent, excellent. So I still now I have two more questions.
Yeah.
Um, but so this is something that I kind of I won't say it's personal because it happened to me a little bit, and I had to shake it off during my professional career before I got back into academia. I found that a lot of the people that I worked with that did have GIS as a skill set kind of got pigeonholed at times as like the GIS guy. Um, is that something that you've encountered in your career thus far? And is that something that's been a problem? I mean, if you're like, hey, this is what I love doing, like I want to be the go-to guy and like basically, other avenues of exploration in my career, like I'm not too worried about that right now, or is that like you feel like maybe you're, I basically just want to say like or ask, do you feel like your lane has been picked for you in some ways, or do you feel that you have a lot of flexibility to kind of define that? You're just like a guy that can do all the other things, plus you're really good at this thing.
Yeah, no, it definitely been pigeonholed for sure. Uh, but I'll be clear. I mean, that's happened to me. I mean, I've seen it happen to a bunch of people. Curse of competency, I guess, or whatever. Uh, like, yeah, you give somebody, you know, one good formatted spreadsheet, and all of a sudden, you're some sort of Excel evangelist. You're the second coming because you know how to format a table. That's happened to me. Even now, I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, not so much that I'm trying to like get out of GIS, but I mean, I am. Like my firm um, just won a contract um, to do this big BRT program in Atlanta, and I'm like trying to figure out how I get in there, because I'm like shit, like I'm an urban planner, like, and not only that, like I'm a like transportation, like that's my thing, so um but like I said before, they got some transportation planners over there that know GIS, so I'm like, okay, how do I approach this? Because I mean, like I said, like there's really, I mean, don't get me wrong, I mean, I they don't know GIS in the way that I do, but they don't necessarily need to for the work, so it's like I can't like wow them necessarily because it's like, they know their way around enough to do what they need to do, um but I'm trying to figure out, how to plug myself in. And also, I mean, and not to get into politics of my firm, but I mean it's also a thing within my firm, you know, how do we sort of expand, because that's damn near, part of my role is to integrate, GIS into these different sort of into some of the different work that we do throughout our firm. Um, so I'm trying to figure out how to push that. But yeah, no, it's a thing that happens for sure. I've seen, people, respond in different ways to that sort of that 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 position. Um, I guess I sort of leaned into it in a sense, in part because, to be honest, like I said, it's really about, part of it's, just like a sort of job security thing, like, making yourself invaluable. Not to say that like there's a million urban planners out there, um, but there are more. There are more. I think that I'd have more competition, I guess, for lack of a better, you know, for lack of a better phrase. I think that, it'd be harder for me to really sort of thrive. And also, I mean, I just realized, where my skill sets lie. But I've also seen people, sort of bucket and find themselves in different lanes. I think, with GIS too, though. I mean, I know that I mentioned my friend that did the migratory bird thing. I mean, I know GIS folks who became, sort of, uh, pseudo epidemiologists. I know GIS folks who became, crime statisticians. I mean, like it's really like if you're trying to sort of expand your role beyond the strictly technical, there are opportunities. I guess it depends on how you sort of come in and how you sort of make your connections. Um, but to answer your question, yes, it happens. It happens across the board. Um, for sure. Pretty much. I mean, besides my role now, which like had some precedence for GIS, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. Every other job I've had really had no idea what to do with me. Um, like, uh, you can kind of, and I sort of, like I said, people just sort of follow like what you're good at, for better or worse. And so that's sort of how I ended up in all these different sort of data management GIS roles. But yeah.
No, that's yeah. I mean, like I said, that was a personal one too, because I noticed that happened to me at points in my career as well. So, all right. So one last question. I know we're
Sure.
we're out of time right now, but just
Yeah.
if you could, and sorry, this is just maybe coming out of nowhere. If you could
Yeah.
give some advice to some of the folks that might be watching this recording later, that are just embarking on this journey of learning the software, learning basics of cartography, learning the basics of data management and analysis. Folks that are going to like come through this program and go out and do other things. Is there any advice you could give them on how to navigate the world outside, or even just how to do it inside, like how eagerly to jump into this and yeah, just based on what you've done thus far, like how would you have done it if you could do it again?
Uh, well, um, eh, yeah. Okay. So obviously, depending on how much room you got in your life, but I think specifically with this stuff, I mean, like I said, I mean, like there's the sort of technical pathway, obviously, right? Like if this is your thing, if you're interested in the technical aspect of the mechanics of GIS and sort of digital information systems, that sort of stuff. I think there's a lot of opportunity there to sort of leverage GIS in a way that I think you used the word earlier, amplifies um, those interests. Now, so that's the technical pathway, and to be honest, even in that pathway, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I guess I've met people who are like solely, sort of on the digital side, but most people I know have some sort of, ulterior interest, whether it's, transportation or marketing or whatever it is. I guess ultimately what I'm getting at is, just like figure out a way to sort of apply it to your interests, um, uh, uh, again, the way that jazz curriculum is structured in general, and even the way the departments are structured across a lot of municipalities. I mean, it was easy for me because I mean it was so contextualized within the sort of urban planning application. But I mean, there's so much opportunity there in everything from public health to marketing to you know um, to even communication studies, sociology, all these different things. I mean, um, hydrology, whatever, so many different engineering applications. I mean, it's really just about like, um, you know, applying it in different ways. I mean, like, yes, I mean, like when I started, I mean, like, even the way that I got hooked up with Motor City Match, Motor City Mapping, was I was helping again my back. I had all this interest in urban ag, so I was helping these folks, mapping this project. At the time, it was called shit. I don't even remember. It was something out of Johns Hopkins, but basically they were going around to different grocery stores and trying to map the quality of groceries and all these different. I just volunteered. I just found I found this guy. I think I was at something. I found this guy and I was like, oh yeah, I know how to make maps. And format tables, stuff that nobody wants to do. So like I just started doing that, and then and through that you sort of meet this network of like, like-minded folks, and you're never really too many steps away from like somebody who can give you an opportunity. So so yeah, I'd say it's really, and whether you're doing it through what I just mentioned or like however, just sort of find whatever that network is, or even if it's not a network, just find whatever you're interested in, because there's probably a network behind it. And just get to work. Even you'd be surprised, even with the intro stuff that you're learning, you know you'd be surprised how much utility that has for folks, who have just never seen these concepts on a map. Like, yeah.
Absolutely. That's excellent advice and guidance on that. I don't know if Meg has a comment or question, but feel free to unmute yourself real fast. If so,
Hi everyone. So generally my question is for both Tyler and you. Um, my background is geology, but I'm interested in GIS, and I'm actually thinking of doing my PhD in geospatial analytics. And generally my question is, yes, GIS is a tool like Tyler said, and how we apply it depends on our interests. And I'm specifically interested in geology. Um, but would you say it's more of developing our skill sets with the current educational level, whatever we have? I'm doing my master's now, whatever educational level we're currently on, or, like pursuing a higher education in it would be also another advantage. That's why I'm sending my question for both Tyler and you, Eric.
all right, Tyler, go for it. You can start first.
Uh, 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 I I think it depends on what kind of learner you are, I guess. Like I don't actually have, I didn't get the certificate. I don't even know if I took the advanced GIS course. Uh, I might have. But anyways, I mean, like, uh, I my thing came my uh my acumen really was driven just by sort of the curiosity of how things work, and sort of I just kept sort of digging into that, and then like learning how things work, and that's sort of how I developed my skill set. So I mean, I think I don't know. I sort of go back and forth because I mean, I see folks who have taken who have masters in GIS and certificates, and I see that like I mean they've obviously sort of accelerated, you know, their understanding, and but I think so much of it just comes down to doing it, and I think that like the doing it, if you have a motivation to do it, like I said, from a sort of corresponding interest, you know at least for me personally, like that will you'll find yourself, um picking up a lot, you know just by virtue of wanting to be able to do, answer the questions you have. But yeah, I don't know, I can't really say, which path is best, because I mean, like I said, I've seen people on either end. Uh, uh, yeah, I'm not sure. I mean,
Yeah, no,
sorry. One last thing I'll say is, in general, I mean, I guess, I've never got a PhD, obviously, or anything, but in general, I just think, uh, diversity of education is always a good thing. But that's just so I mean, if if you got a master's in this, maybe getting something else just to sort of diversify your understanding and your portfolio of skills, but again, I mean, I'm no academic advisor, but that's just sort of my general philosophy.
yeah, no, I agree. It's kind of interesting. I think after going through the process of getting a PhD, my perspective on education, and particularly like attaining different degrees has changed. Honestly, the main reason that like one should pursue a doctorate in particular in something is because they have questions that they can't answer through more conventional means, and they want to devote a portion of their life to like asking those questions and answering them. Um, Obviously, I'm not going to be like you should or shouldn't get a PhD in a particular path, but I would say because of the fact that GIS and geospatial analysis and everything is an incredible tool, if your desire is to spend your career asking questions about the greater use of that tool and the systems that go with that, then not a bad idea. But if you just are enamored with this tool itself, then you can pursue any set of passions you want in any field you'd like, and just get really good at using that tool to answer that question. Um, I mean, obviously, I imagine there's like a niche that's probably a well compensated one, perhaps, for becoming an expert at using it with a PhD, at the end of your name and a doctor at the front of it. But if you have other questions that go outside of the realm of like devoting your life to geospatial analysis and things around it, then I would say that, like looking in that and looking at the questions you have and then refining your use of this tool. Because I mean, I was okay with using GIS. I was decent at it as I worked with my job, but I really kind of stepped up to the next level as I was applying it to the questions I had while I was working on my dissertation. And so at that point, I became kind of a super user because the fact that I needed that tool in order to answer my questions. Um, I enjoyed being a GIS guy in the jobs I worked for engineering firms, but I found that I found a lot more meaning in it itself when I used it to answer other questions I had. So I don't know, Richard, if you have any inputs on this, being like a GIS guy as well. But
Yeah, that was very well said, and I could try to recap that. I'm in the School of Social Work, and maybe I'd say I'll just throw out a number 15. I can think of 15 professors of social work that have made GIS a key part of their career, and Claudia Colton founded the National Neighborhood Indicators Partnership many years ago with the Urban Institute. And then Amy Hillier at UPenn, she actually graduated from their doctoral program, but then was hired by their school of planning to teach GIS. So she kind of fell into it. She was that one person in the School of Social Work who was using it in her dissertation for food mapping. She was passionate about food security and gender, and she needed GIS to do that dissertation, and it landed her first job. Eventually, the School of Social Work hired her back. But yeah, like you said, it's if you're passionate about blank, housing, transportation, like that's got to be your thing, and GIS can help you do that. If you're 100% passionate about GIS, yeah, there are these niche programs out there that, like a doctorate in GIS. Maybe it's like a more of a geography degree. Maybe it's more of a engineering side degree. Like if you want to be the coder on the cutting edge of coding for GIS. But for me, that's like, that's not what I did.
yeah, and I don't know if you'd have to go to like the University of Kentucky or if you'd have to go to like England to pursue like
Penn
that
State,
kind of thing. But
Penn State is the one I know of. Yeah, I'm trying to think of some others that have just that, like the PhD in GIS, or the master's PhD.
yeah, for sure. All right. I don't know, Meg, if you still have the same question, but I do realize that we run over by about 15 minutes. If there's any last kind of minute something, then let's throw it at us. Meg, you're still on. So
We're
yeah,
just
if you have a question.
so proud of Tyler for, coming full
Thank you
circle.
so much. Appreciate it.
Sweet. All right. Well, I will go ahead and close us out. Tyler, Shelton, thank you so much for spending the last hour and some making us savvy to what your experience has been, letting us know a little bit about like what the professional side of GIS is, and just how it's been kind of formative in terms of your experience as a professional. We really, really appreciate it. And please come back, visit the alma mater anytime. I know you're about 4 hours away, but come on through. It'd be great. It'd be great to see you in person.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, thanks for having me. Anything I can do. I mean, yeah, Alex has been trying to, push this for a while now. So glad to see, you know, uh, any effort to support. I'm here for.
Excellent. Well, thank
All
you
right.
again. We really appreciate your time.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. See ya.